The latest entry in the Mortal Kombat franchise just came out, and I'm gonna review it all in one word: relief. Relief over the fact that all of this, yeah, you can just forget all that. Mortal Kombat has a story so confusing that it rivals that of Kingdom Hearts, and that's saying a lot. Where most games have a timeline, Kingdom Hearts has a ball of yarn. Mortal Kombat isn't as bad, but geez, it's confusing. You can't really blame them for having a convoluted story though, as this franchise has 24 differently named games and 77 characters. But thankfully, now you can say fuck all that and come in with the bare necessary knowledge. This is the first Mortal Kombat game I've gotten to play where I can actually focus on and care about the story without a feeling like I'm missing something big. Most of the time. When they revealed that the sequel to Mortal Kombat 11 would be named Mortal Kombat 1, I thought, oh damn, when did Microsoft start developing this series? But this title actually lives up to its name. This is technically the first entry chronologically. Timekeeper Liu Kang reset the timeline in his own ideals, ensuring peace and giving newcomers like myself a new starting point. And it's a great one at that. I'm not a fighting game guy. I can have a lot of fun with them, but I get tired of them pretty easily and rarely break 15 hours on them. They're almost never worth full price to me. But hot damn, Mortal Kombat 1 says fuck that noise, we'll take your 15-hour mark, rip its spine out, whoop your ass with it, and take your $70. Starting off with the gameplay, I think it's a pretty big improvement on MK11. It's buttery smooth to the point where even the characters are having fun. They've changed up characters a bit in both story and moveset, a prime example being Johnny Cage.
What in the actual fuck? Good evening.
They reworked him to now have a hype meter which fills when you perform certain moves and allows for fucking infinite when you activate it. This mechanic takes the place of his green energy balls that have been a staple of his character for a while now, but I honestly like the way he plays in MK1 much more than the others. By the way, if you can't tell already, all I ever do is ride Johnny Cage's cock. They also have contextual differences on the story to make sure the continuity adds up. When you play as Kung Lao in the beginning, he doesn't have his hat moves because he hasn't trained with Liu Kang yet. There are also subtle differences, like how Kenshi looks directly at his opponent initially, but then sort of looks down and to the side after a certain happens. The story also has actual fighters for your cameo character, which you unfortunately cannot replicate in regular matches. And speaking of, I love the cameo system. When they first revealed it, I thought the cameo system was going to be ridiculously gimmicky and essentially be a get-out-of-jail-free card when you're getting comboed. But cameos can't be activated in hit stun and are actually used mainly to extend or reset combos. And some cameos like Sonya Blade can be used in neutral as an anti-air. And there actually is a designated combo breaker input activated when holding R2. This is in my opinion a much better system as it costs you a meter. Sometimes in the campaign, like when you play as Baraka, they'll throw 5 enemies at you in a row, all with lower health. This wave type of match is super fun and I wish they did it more. In the 15 chapters, I only remember them doing it twice, which is disappointing. It's such a fun system, and I don't think they capitalize on it enough. The AI is also pretty good usually, but does have issues sometimes. I'm a little bitch boy who plays on easy mode, but the AI will sometimes fucking pop off and hit me with a 14-hit combo. It also gets fucking spammy. How many times is Havoc gonna puke on me in one match? It's Scarecrow's hook all over again. Test Your Might does make a returning appearance, and I can't tell if I love it or hate it. It's basically QTEs but with button mashing, and it's kinda stupid. I do like it a little bit in the story, but not in Invasions when it's part of a tower. It is pretty harmless though, as you're able to turn it off in story and it'll just play like a cutscene. The size of the roster totals at 22 fighters, or 23 if you pre-ordered the game or paid for Shang Tsung. This is a pretty good sized roster and about the same size as its predecessor, and it'll probably end up being the same with its DLC. Base MK11 has 25 characters, and DLC MK11 has 37 characters. MK1 is already confirmed to have multiple DLC packs, one of them being revealed already, so chances are it'll match or even surpass MK11. By the way, once this pack comes out, I'm only playing Johnny, Homelander, and Peacemaker. The rest of the entire roster is dead to me. But as is now, this is a pretty decently sized roster that unfortunately is lacking a few iconic characters. Like, I know this is sort of an origin, but really, Sonya Blade isn't in the game, and fucking Tanya is. Tanya! Hey, to the Tanya fan out there, I'm sorry, but I truly have absolutely no interest in this character or her playstyle. It does make sense to not include Sonya, since Johnny just got out of a very serious relationship in the story, and him meeting his future wife immediately after would seem lame. But, come on. No Jax? No Goro? How are you gonna put Natara in and not Goro? I am a touch upset that this game doesn't have Aaron Black, as I really like him and think he's a bit underrated, but I don't know how he would have fit into the story, so I'm not too torn up about it. I think NetherRealm really nailed the sound design in MK1. Every crunch and squish sounds brutally real. The fire sound effects sound pretty realistic too, and the way blades sing as they fly through the air is really well done. This is definitely my favorite Mortal Kombat game visually. It looks stunning. I've had a lot of issues with the Mortal Kombat franchise due to visuals. I can't stand MKX because it is quite possibly the ugliest thing I've had to look at. Then in 11 they realized that their games don't have to look like a DC movie, and with this game they finally understand that colors are visually appealing. And it's so graphically advanced that the gore didn't bother me 99% of the time, but then I'd see something so gross in such high definition that my stomach would turn a little. I played this game right after Injustice 2 and while I was editing that video, and it was so refreshing to see this. After 3 hours of this. It's pretty detailed too. After a few hours of manual labor, Kung Lao's hoodie was wet with his sweat, which is pretty impressive. And watch this scene.
Awarded, for I have saved the best for last. I have recently discovered a cure-all of unrivaled potency. It will soon be on the shelves in every home of Outworld.
As the camera pans around to the front of the wagon, Shang Tsung's voice becomes much clearer, which is pretty cool attention to detail. I'm a big fan of the character designs as well. Liu Kang looks amazing with his different color flame attacks. Johnny Cage now has a normal sized head, and I love how Smoke's mask has a rounded end like a gas mask. And I much prefer young Raiden's design in comparison to his old ones. The designs for Scorpion and Sub-Zero are also pretty cool, keeping it based around the classic designs while also modernizing them. I do have a few issues with the character designs though. Darius looks like a snowboarder from Hoodwinked, and I'm neutral on Johnny's battlesuit. I can't tell if it's supposed to be like G.I. Joe, which would fit his character, but regardless, I'm not a fan. And I can't tell who, but Quan Chi reminds me of someone. He looks so familiar. I just can't put my finger on who. The voice acting? The story is pretty solid. Alright, the voice acting is really well done. Everyone does a good job except Megan Fox, who seems like she's half-assing it. She's not as bad as Ronda Rousey was, but still, I think someone put Megan Bot's batteries in the wrong way before recording. At least she doesn't play a character that's super important to the story. The majority of the time you're going to be focused on how good Steve Bloom is as Baraka and Andrew Bowen killing it as Johnny. Yuri Lowenthal also does a great job as Smoke. I could only tell it was Spider-Man when he grunted. The only time the voice acting is really off, besides the obvious, is when Baraka or Havoc talk. Their performance is good, but it just looks goofy when they talk without lips. The dialogue and writing is pretty well done. Just as a warning, the Cage glazing is going to start again, but he's hilarious in this game. He talks a lot in movie quotes from Back to the Future to fucking Sharknado, and brings up a lot of dumb shit like CageCon. He's on his phone recording a lot too, and we even get a shot through the camera of his phone. I love his arc in this game of taking things more seriously, and how his rivalry with Kenshi over Sento evolves into a bromance. And while I do like the dialogue in this game, it sometimes doesn't make any sense. And it's very hard to catch, but if you look closely, sometimes the subtitles don't match dialogue exactly. Here's a good example.
That you are party to Shao's treason. Know that it will cost you your life.
They're also very self-aware in how dumb they can be when they give into their tropes. Like, watch how they execute on these two staples of MK in the first chapter. NetherRealm just overall has a great sense of humor.
I can't let them die.
They also get really creative with character origins, like Shang Tsung being a snake oil salesman, and his old man design from previous games is just a disguise to help him sell elixir. And I think Shang Tsung might be my favorite way a character is written in this game. He's so slimy and greasy and arrogant, I fucking love it. He's not one for the meager life he lives in the beginning, and when he's approached by Kronika, his ambitious nature shows through. He reminds me a lot of Loki in the MCU. I could totally hear Shang Tsung saying that an ant has no quarrel with a boot. And to briefly cover the story without spoiling it like I will later, I think it's an overall improvement to what the story was before. It's not as convoluted, and you don't need nearly as much context as before. I do have a few issues here and there, like the campaign gets a little bit repetitive as there are only so many bad guys you can fight. The cutscenes can run a little long as well, but there are some beautiful shots and great cinematography to keep your attention. This is also a great time for a reboot. It's kind of like Marvel's Ultimate Comics, where they provided a new starting point for new fans to hop on without needing to do tons of background research. The campaign does have a feel-good ending, but the finale falls off a bit regardless, as there's practically no lead-up. You're also forced to play as some characters that aren't for everyone in some chapters. The worst case of this for me was Ashura. I hate her playstyle and found her chapter to be miserable, especially coming off of Baraka's. In the last few chapters, the campaign falls into a trope that's fairly obvious and has been done 1,000 times, but it's a trope I'm a big fan of, so for me personally, it wasn't a big deal. It's also very important to mention that while this is a good starting point, you do need basic knowledge of 11 and 11's DLC, Aftermath. I suspect the sequel to MK1 will be the clean start I was hoping this one would be. The campaign as a whole is pretty fun to play through and only lacks in the ending. But even then, the ending is fun. It's a junk food finale. It may not be high quality, but it's very enjoyable. So now I'm going to get into slight spoilers with how they change certain characters and then talk about the story. Don't worry, I'll warn you when I get deep into spoilers about the story, and this won't be another 30-minute shitstorm. But first I want to say that I have a big issue with the game spoiling things for you. If you're playing through the story, do not play Invasions or Towers. They spoil the ending, so avoid those game modes like the plague until you finish the campaign, if you care about that. But yeah, slight spoilers here, but they change a lot about characters. They do the characters justice and give them the same plot points, but go about them differently. The best comparison I can think of is how in No Way Home, Peter learns that with great power comes great responsibility, but it's not through Uncle Ben like it usually is. It's through the death of Aunt May, who spent 3 movies helping those in need and founding Feast. They do the same in MK1 where, for example, Tarkatans are not a race of people, but victims of the Tarkat disease, which turns people into monstrosities like Baraka. Instead of being a clone of Kitana with Tarkatan DNA, Melina is now Kitana's sister who is infected with Tarkat, and when she doesn't have her antidote for a while, her mouth transforms. And instead of Ermac blinding Kenshi, this happens. And I love how Kenshi is part of the Taira clan who now go by Takahashi, and he needs Sento to lead the Taira out of the Yakuza. Raiden and Liu Kang have seemed to have switched places now, with Liu Kang the teacher and Raiden the rule-abiding friend to Kung Lao. Another big difference is how Smoke, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero are all part of the Lin Kuei. What really shocked me the most though, and made me realize that they're doing their own thing now, is who's who. Now, there's basically always been one Scorpion, Hanzo Hisashi. He was in a rivalry with Bi-Han, known as Sub-Zero, and then Bi-Han turned into Noob Saibot. Bi-Han's younger brother Kuai Liang took up the mantle of Sub-Zero. Well, it turns out that in Mortal Kombat 1, Sub-Zero is Bi-Han and Scorpion is his younger brother Kuai Liang. This really shocked me, as we now have no clue where Hanzo is or if he'll ever show up. And maybe there won't ever be a Noob Saibot. My theory is Kuai Liang will kill Bi-Han and take the mantle, then Bi-Han will come back and become Noob, and then Hanzo will come back like he does in the movie after the arrival of his ancestor, Cole Young. What's really funny though is how the brother with the fire powers is the more cool over and calm one, while the brother with the ice powers is the hothead. So now let's start getting into the story, and I won't get into detail, I'm just going to cover some notable stuff and critique a little. So firstly, it starts with Shang Tsung living a life as a snake oil salesman, which is pretty fun, and Kronika, later revealed to be an alternate timeline Shang Tsung, tells him he was meant for more and teaches him. Now, that's fine, but Kronika specifically says that Shang Tsung lives a meaningless life because a higher power deemed it so. This turns Shang Tsung evil, which kinda pisses me off, as it implies that Shang Tsung is pretty much inherently evil. One of my favorite sayings is that one often meets his destiny on the path he takes to avoid it. And that could apply to this story really well. They could have made it so that Liu Kang gives Shang Tsung a meaningless life so that he won't end up becoming the villain. But because he went so overboard, Shang Tsung finds out about this and he becomes the villain, wanting revenge for Liu Kang ruining his life. I also think opening with Kronika was a bad call. I'm not a diehard Mortal Kombat fan, so I could be wrong about her reception, but the overwhelming majority of opinions I've heard about her are negative, except one. But that one positive opinion was from someone who's not the most trustworthy reviewer. But what do I think is the more important question? Obviously, my opinion is the only one that matters. That's why I have a YouTube channel. They don't just hand these bad boys out. I have a Google account. So what do I think of Kronika? I didn't exactly quote-unquote pay attention to the story of Mortal Kombat 11, so 0 points for Bootleg Frieza. Starting Johnny's section as one of his films is hilarious and endlessly entertaining. This cutscene is long, but I could have watched the entire movie they're shooting. They also mimic John Williams' score excellently, and the director is supposed to be Spielberg. I'm also a big fan of Liu Kang's friendship with Geras, and they have great dialogue. Another issue I have is how the fabric of time splits, creating multiple timelines. Not only does this reboot require that you play the last game, but the last game's DLC as well. You can scrape bio without playing them, and it still makes sense, but I feel they rely on it too much. But the trope that they fall into is the heroes and villains teaming up to stop a greater evil. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's a trope that I really enjoy as it hits me nostalgically and reminds me of when they did it in LEGO Marvel Superheroes. I'm also getting kind of tired of multiverse shit, and MK1 uses the multiverse to abandon the plot and turn into Avengers Endgame. I really don't like this as a story, as everyone you play as is a timekeeper, which means that no one from our timeline is there, and no matter who you pick, you don't play as one of our characters, even Liu Kang. It really does annoy me that all the characters we've been playing as are now twiddling their thumbs on their Earthrealm while the final battle is going on. But I do love all these different iterations of characters you see in fight. And they bring back MK11 models for characters like Cassie and Jackie. I really appreciate how the final character you play as is your choice, even if the execution is a bit rough. I also thought that we'd get more of a resolution to Melina and the Tarkat disease, which is a touch disappointing. The ending is somewhat lame and is a disappointment plot-wise, but is enjoyable nonetheless. I also love the dialogue of the tea house cutscene at the end. It's very heartwarming. And Mortal Kombat 1 unfortunately features one of the lamest credit scenes I've ever seen. I do not care at all about an evil Dark Lord Havoc. He's a joke to me. Not as bad as Reiko, cause that dude sucks and all he ever does is meat ride General Shao. But still, I really don't care about Havoc. His moves are just funny. Mortal Kombat 1 is definitely my favorite in the series, in gameplay, story, looks, and characters. The only disadvantage is Kuai Liang as Scorpion, which isn't necessarily worse than Hanzo. I'm just not accustomed to it yet. And I don't know where his story is gonna go. I think it clearly takes the cake for best fighting game of 2023, beating out Street Fighter 6, and is probably a top 10 game I've played in 2023. I'd probably give this game an 8.5 out of 10, and I'm really excited to see where NetherRealm goes with this new timeline. Thank you guys so much for watching and making it to the end of this video. I hope you liked it as much as I liked making it, and if you did, a thumbs up would be greatly appreciated, and maybe checking out my other stuff too. This game really was a highlight of the year for me, and it's probably one I'm just gonna keep on playing in my spare time until Spider-Man 2 comes out. That's gonna take up all of my time. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought of Mortal Kombat 1. I'm always interested in hearing what you guys have to say. And if you leave a comment, chances are I'm gonna respond to you, as I love discussing these with you. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video.